There are many things about our world that are different right now.
The way we work.
The way we live.
And why we give.
One thing remains the same.
What we do together today
determines how we live united tomorrow.
The way Central Ohio rallied this year to help others is proof. Thanks to our generous donors, our Community Response Fund quickly reached more than $2 million.
It helps support more than 70 local not-for-profits and thousands of our neighbors in need.
But as this crisis continues, there's so much work to do.
It's the tough work.
The work that'll be needed to provide relief.
So our community can begin to recover and rebuild.
It's the very work that the United Way of Central Ohio does every day.
And has been doing for nearly 100 years.
We feed people facing food insecurity.
We connect people in crisis to resources that help pay bills and keep them in their homes.
We help prepare children for success in school, work, and life.
In a year that's been hard for many,
you can make a difference.
Give today to help people facing challenges with basic needs and education.
Give today to provide families relief and hope.
Give today to United Way's Community Response Fund.
Because what we do together today,
together today
determines how we live united.
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 United tomorrow.
Hi everybody, can you hear me better this time? Awesome. Okay, sorry about that. I had to do a little quick switch with our technology, so appreciate you all for bearing with us. So with that again, just wanted to thank everybody for taking the time today to join us for Let's Lead United Impact on Philanthropy panel as part of the Rally for Recovery Week. We have a full week of learning sessions and volunteer opportunities that you can see and sign up for at liveunitedcentralohio.org/rally. And with that, I'd love to start by introducing our two panelists today. So first we have Ajadi Matoyer, who is a staff attorney at the Franklin Court Common Police Court, and Nate Rogers, VP of Transformation Acceleration at Ohio Health, and I hope I got those both right. So awesome. At any point, if you have any questions, feel free to throw those on the chat box and we'll try our best to answer them live on the actual panel. So with that, I would love to open the floor to our two panelists to introduce themselves and give us a little bit more of their background, as well as their connection to United Way and why they're joining us today on this panel. Ajadi, would you love to go first?
Sure. Like Sol said, my name is Ajadi Misfoyer. I am currently a staff attorney for the Franklin County Common Police Court for Judge Stephen McIntosh. I am from Columbus originally. Went to school here, went to undergrad at Xavier in Cincinnati, and then went to law school in Texas. And so after law school, I moved back home to take the bar and was, still looking for a job. and got in touch with Diana Shrimp, who was at the time the relationship manager for Link. And she told me about Link and how to get involved. And that's pretty much how I got started with United Way. And from there, I was on the steering committee for many years, ended up being the chair of Link, and I'm currently on the board of United Way.
Thank you so much, Ajadi. Your service to this organization was obviously way beyond my times, and honestly, the legacy that you've created with Link and everything beyond that is amazing. So thank you for all your service. And with that, I'd love to hear your connections and background as well.
Yeah, thanks, Solo. So since I was 4, I've grown up in Columbus, so this community is near and dear to me. Tried to leave once for college. My now wife, then girlfriend, brought me back to Ohio State. So I've done 2 tours at Ohio State, undergrad and graduate. And I currently work at Ohio Health. And I'm very fortunate to lead a group focused on innovation, which has a unnecessarily complicated name of transformation acceleration, but it's really about bringing us from where we are today to where we need to be tomorrow on some of those elements that require radical innovation. My journey with United Way actually started with my previous employer, which was Victoria's Secret within L Brands. And I'll be really transparent. My very first engagement was just, thou shalt give. And so I did. And I did that for a number of years exclusively until also Diana, who engaged with Azure D, reached out to me and said, hey, you know, you're just the right target for this group called the Young Leadership Group, which admittedly has a funny name given my gray beard, but bear with me, the age piece is less important than the fact that it's a group of folks getting engaged beyond just giving monetarily. And so for the last several years, I've been actively involved with that steering committee. I had the honor of serving on 2 campaign cabinets for the Central Ohio campaigns for United Way. And I'm currently in service as the chair for the Young Leadership Group.
Amazing, thank you, Nate. And again, just as Azure D, your involvement at United Way is so imperative in furthering our mission, and having you both as volunteer leaders and champions of the work is so amazing. And I've had the pleasure of working with you pretty much the whole time I've been at United Way so far. So really appreciate your leadership. And again, thank you for being on the call with me today. For this panel specifically, we really wanted to tap into what philanthropy and impact means to both of you, as well as how you see that transforming the community, and how change leaders can be more involved and further the mission of both United Way, as well as seeing it through the lens of what COVID-19 is doing for our community right now. So with that, I'm just going to jump right in and start asking some questions. And again, for everybody in the audience, feel free to throw questions for both myself and the panelists in the chat, and we'll do the best of our ability. Ooh, English today is not happening, to answer those questions for you. So my first question for our panelists would be to talk about your passions. I'd love to know, I think I have a pretty good idea, but I'd love to know what really motivates you, both in terms of a philanthropic aspect, and brings you back to United Way and creating a better community for everybody. And we'll start with Nate on this one.
All right, thanks, Solo. So it's interesting, my passion around community has evolved over a number of years, but I found it's rooted in kind of the core of what I consider to be my purpose, both in philanthropy and in my daily life. So I've had a good fortune working in a lot of professional roles that allow me to bring people together to solve problems. And a lot of that's been in the digital space or the marketing space. And eventually, as I got more and more engaged in the community, I was realizing that this passion in bringing people together to solve problems was perfect for impacting our community. And I'll be honest, my philanthropy journey's changed. It really started out as I could just give money, and that's going to be the trick for me. But when I really realized that the spirit that drives me at work, which we use the design thinking process among other problem-solving processes. But as soon as I learned that same technique could really be really valuable in engaging members of the community that needed help in solving problems in a way that worked and resonated for them, a light bulb went off, and I was like, I can give more than just time, or more than just money, and give my time, and give some of my talents. And so that's had me excited recently, like getting to know those who formerly my money went to support, and now my money and my time and talents go to support, and really understand their world, and not pretend that, that from afar I have the answers, but instead that alongside those who need support, I can make a difference. And I found that really energizing, and frankly enlightening, because the reality is I've lived a very privileged life from the get-go, and every time I talk to an individual that needs support in this community, I learn more about what my privilege means to me and what others experience. And so finding ways to come together is really the heart of my passion around this solo.
Awesome. I love hearing that, Nate. And, you kind of touch on a few things. So the whole idea of giving, advocating, and volunteering as like that natural path of philanthropy is quite common, honestly, with a lot of those like volunteer leaders that we see, including the both of you. So you touch on all three of those kind of aspects of what, that big philanthropy umbrella can really encompass for people that do want to get involved, and get down to the nitty-gritty center of it and really devote their time. So you really are doing my job for me right now by already kind of laying that out. So thank you for that. Ajudi, I'd love to hear more about your passions as well.
Yes, definitely. For me, I'm really passionate about helping the community, obviously, and specifically marginalized communities. I think, growing up, I've always been involved in some type of community service, whether it's through church. My church is Holy Rose of St. John, and we have the St. John Community Kitchen right next door. So I grew up volunteering there with various youth groups, and even through college, and with my sorority, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, which at the crux of it has a very strong emphasis on community service. So it's something that I've always been involved in. And so I really can't see myself never being involved in some type of community service. And, as of now, I just, try to use my skills and kind of what Nate said, and, analyzing problems and fixing problems. Like, as an attorney, that's pretty much what we do. And try to, do the best that I can where I am. Toni Morrison had a quote saying, what can you do where you are? Not everyone is going to be marching. Not everyone is going to be, doing all that, or, policy making, but what can you do where you are? And so that's pretty much been my focus throughout this year, and even in previous years, doing the best I can and helping those communities that really need help, who have been, been a victim of like a lot of systematic issues that we have in the country.
Thank you, Ajudi. I actually really identify with that in terms of like always having some sort of community involvement with growing up and being in those spaces that you're always, taught and trained, for lack of a better word, to, give back and be as community supported and uplifted always. I love the whole motto of what can you do now where you are. Something that one of my old mentors really left me with was that you're doing what you need to be doing now to get where you want to be later in the future, as well as you're helping who you need to help right now. So then you can both be better off later in the future. So the whole idea of always being there for your fellow person is a really strong one that I think, and I've really experienced here in Columbus. Obviously didn't grow up here, but I've been here for almost 7 years now, and that's a spirit that I haven't really seen in many other places in the world. So I've really been appreciative of that, and you too as well. And obviously the two of you have kind of bolstered that and made it even more obvious. So thank you. I'm going to thank you a lot today, so bear with me, but it's well deserved as well. So with that, I'm going to move on to my next question, but there are a couple of nuggets that I'm going to come back with what you said in terms of privilege, and then kind of that idea of service again. But my next question would be what the most memorable moments, the most memorable moments you've had serving our community. So if you could speak to that, the floor is open.
I'll go. I think the most memorable moments I've had have been with Link specifically. For those of you who don't know, Link is the Young Professional Affinity Group with United Way, and it focuses on rallying young people around the mission of United Way, as well as other professional development opportunities. So oftentimes, like every year, we would have the school makeover, which was probably one of my favorite and most memorable events, because you're around a lot of young people who are like-minded, who don't necessarily look like you, but find value in helping the community just like I do, and being able to go to various schools around the city which have been struggling in terms of performance, funding, and just doing small things that you really wouldn't think that would help a child with their educational progress. Just having a nice, clean, safe environment helps students in their learning. And so even just cleaning or painting the bathrooms, or painting their classrooms, painting the playground, when students come and have that vibrant environment, it's just helpful. You understand that having that environment will benefit them in the future. So I think that event, as well as Books and Brews, which is one of my other most memorable and fun volunteer opportunities that I've done recently, like I said, with the school makeover, just being around people who are like-minded, and you're having fun, but you're also doing well for the community. So it's not just about having fun and getting together and drinking beer, but you're doing something for the community that really makes an impact. So those are my two.
I hear that. I was only fortunate enough to be a part of one school makeover last summer, but the immediate effect that it had was, so recognizable, and talking to different people around the community about that, and then seeing it, and then bringing it up, and it coming back to the work that we put in to make that happen was pretty awesome. And then with Books and Brews that you mentioned, last year, I think we had over 4,000 books that we were able to collect and then donate back to, those in need. So really, really impactful work while also having fun. So always love doing that. Nate, I'm going to pass it on to you.
Yeah, so I think I love what Azurdi said about the people, because for me, all the memorable moments for me are about interactions with the people, some of whom are the folks who I serve alongside on various boards or work on activities with. But the one that sticks out, if you ask for a moment, is actually one of the chances I got at the Van Buren shelter to kind of get close to the experience of some of the members of our community in need. And I will be honest, this moment was the single most profound, like kind of way for me to get shocked into realizing the privilege I had compared to some other individuals. We were touring the shelter with a group just to learn about their operation. And the idea is, when you're touring, you don't always get taken into parts of the shelter where all of the residents are living at that moment, so that it doesn't feel like they're on display. And so we were in kind of the dormitory section where people stayed, but all of them were out of that section dining at the moment. And so the host was able to give us a tour without it feeling like, we were really tourists in somebody else's life. Yet down the hallway, one resident was coming back to her room kind of outside of the normal cycle. And as she got closer to us, she was holding a newborn baby in each arm. She had just had twins, and this was her first day home from the hospital. So she got discharged. And think about this, I'm a healthcare professional, I'm digesting this. Here's an individual who I can imagine in one of our hospitals having just delivered 2 babies. And for her, her very first experience outside the hospital was bringing her 2 newborns back to Van Buren Shelter, which is a temporary living facility. And it's a fantastic program, but it's not a place to create structure and permanence in a household and a family. And I cannot forget that moment, because instantly I just started crying, kind of overwhelmed for that individual, and overwhelmed personally for how few stories just like that I was aware of, and how much that is someone else's reality. And that really stuck with me. And it started a domino of my interest in understanding my privilege and better understanding the world of those who need a little bit of support, and live a different life than I live, and come from a different set of experiences. So that's a little miniature story that I'll never forget.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Nate. That's really, really special. And, I appreciate you for being so open and vulnerable with us today. And kind of on that note, before, I go through the list of questions that we have, I do want to spend a second on touching on that privilege and, the whole idea of equity and how that kind of plays together to create the community that we have. And, that cycle that creates. So I know that you kind of work and really rally for those people in need, but I'd love to spend a second to hear your thoughts a little bit more on, the whole idea of how privilege really has shaped both your lives, or how you see it influencing our community, and where we can work towards to make our community a more just and equitable one. I know I'm just kind of springing this onto you, but I'm sure you have comments and ideas on that. And I'm not going to pick who goes first.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, that's something that I had been thinking about, even in my life. I mean, even as a Black woman, I do have certain privileges that not everyone has. Both my parents are educated, both my parents went to college. I was able to go to better schools in the city of Columbus. I was able to go to college, go to law school, and become an attorney. And not everyone has those privileges. And I think it's my responsibility to use the skills and privileges that I have been given. And not to say that people with privilege don't work hard. I've worked hard to get to where I am, but I also understand that it's been on the backs of people who came before me as well. And I think that it's important for me to use those privileges and that knowledge to help others. I think when we get to a certain stage in our lives, it's important for us to understand and be educated on the systems that are in place in society. And over my time with United Way, being able to sit in on various webinars or panels and talks. Specifically, I know Michael Wilkos does a great presentation about the city of Columbus and how it has come to be in terms of its racial makeup, in terms of its economic makeup, and the economic segregation that goes on within the city. And I think it's important to understand that these things didn't just happen by chance. These things happen by design. And I think it's our responsibility to make those changes and do what we can to help those who have been oppressed by the system by no fault of their own. So that's my thoughts on that.
Thank you, Ashley. Go ahead, Nate. Sorry, I don't want to stop the flow.
No, no worries. So I'm in the midst of my journey and coming to grips with my privilege, which I think will likely be the case for my whole life. It started where I think everybody's privilege starts, which is I had the luxury, and I've got all the stereotypical privilege, right? Straight white male from a middle class upbringing. And my privilege came in the luxury of I actually didn't have to think about inequity. It didn't hit my world all day, every day in a way that gave me negative impact when I woke up in the morning. So I think privilege first starts as an ignorance of your privilege. And I'd love to say that I figured that out, you know, once I hit 18 or once I graduated college, and that is just not accurate. You know, it's been within the last maybe 5 to 7 years that I've finally started to come to grips with just what my privilege means. And to Azure D's point, my very first kind of pivot into exploring my privilege came at a conference that our candidate for the 12th district for Congress, Elena Shearer, hosted. She started a group that's now called Together Digital, formerly Women in Digital. And it was about gender and privilege. So it's a very small percentage of men were invited to the conference. It was hilariously, I think at that time, the percent of men that held executive roles in advertising. And so like something with only like 3% of attendees could be men, which I thought was an amazing signal. But fortunately, I was able to be one of those men, and we had a breakout session about the privilege of men in the industry we all worked in. And it was all male breakout session. And I fell into the trap that Azure D just talked about, where we talked about our success and our path to get to where we were. And I said, time out, hold on a second. I did all the work to get to where I am. And as soon as I said it, I looked around the room and I was like, hang on a second, like I'm not realizing what we're here to talk about. And the facilitator of the session said, well, you worked really hard, but is it possible that your running of the bases, using like a baseball analogy, started with you already on second base maybe? And that you've worked real hard to get to third and to home plate. But there are other folks that have to, you know, try to hit the ball from home plate before they even go to first or second or third. And he said, is it possible also that there are people who don't even get a chance to get up the bat? And as soon as he said that, I was like, I'm an idiot. Like, I've been living my whole life not realizing that to Azure D's word, just because I'm standing on the shoulders of others to move forward doesn't make my accomplishments and my work less noteworthy, but it also doesn't mean that everyone got the same start in the race that I did. And I've been working on that for the last handful of years to try to unpack it, and it hurts. And it starts at the very beginning to feel like acknowledging your privilege means you've got to take away from your own self in order to give to someone else who has unfairly started the race from a different starting point. And I'm wrestling through that, like realizing that's not the case. Like it's not a zero-sum game where for me to be successful or for me to be accomplished or live well, someone else has to live poorly. And to me, that's one of the biggest unlocks for me is by coming together, we can actually all live very well and all be successful. And you don't have to push someone down in order to get yourself higher, or you don't have to give something up in order for someone else to advance. It can be done in collaboration. We can all rise together.
Thank you so much, Nate. Thank you both, honestly, for that. That was, again, not something we had specifically planned for, but did want to touch on. And I love the idea of that you both bring on as it being a journey. Like it really does, especially for, I'll say everybody to go through that journey, but it is a journey and we need to also give ourselves some grace. So want to make sure that we're also letting that sink in as well and invite ourselves to go even deeper. There's always going to be something else. We're never going to be at 100% of being, fully realized. anti-racist, fully realized understanding our privileges in every capacity, form, and shape. So I appreciate you for sharing kind of your stories and thoughts on privilege and how our community is shaped and how we're going to work to create a more equitable one and breaking those cycles of oppression that do exist. So thank you for indulging me in that question. And there's, I know, so much more we can keep talking about on that subject, but I'll leave it to our participants and attendees to touch on those if you do want to hear more about that in the chat. So thank you again for that. And with that, actually, the one question I keep thinking of when it comes to that equity and privilege link is kind of our community's journey with COVID-19 recovery. So, we all know it's disproportionately affected people that are more marginalized and more in need. So with that, I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on how our journey looks like and how your own experience kind of reflects that. I have to pick on somebody again.
Azadi, I can kick us
off. Thank you.
Starting from the healthcare perspective, we've been really close to the entire COVID conversation, right? So my whole team ended up getting redeployed onto an innovation team focused on supporting COVID in March. And what's interesting in terms of talking about community impact and disproportionate impact for some members of the community is on one side of the coin, this to me is one of the most profound shared experiences our community has had because it's impacting everyone. You can't talk to anyone in Central Ohio and not have them acknowledge they're somehow impacted by COVID. Whether they've got a story of personal illness or family or friend illness or death or employment impact, daily life impact, educational impact, everyone's got something. And so in a time where we're having a hard time with different factions in our nation having conversations with each other on common ground, on one side of the coin, I'm like, I've observed that suddenly we've all got one thing to talk about. But then on the flip side of that is never more than ever have I observed more separation of the haves and the have-nots and more distancing in an accelerated fashion of the inequities that are embedded in our community every day. So disproportionate health outcomes are not a new thing. When you look at infant mortality, it has disproportionately impacted the African-American community in Columbus, like all other cities in the nation, for decades. And to Azadi's point, there's a really clear correlation to that and all the social determinants of health that you can track back to practices like redlining and all kinds of segregation practices. Well, that reared its ugly head when COVID started hitting the community, and the economic divide started growing as well. So the first waves of layoffs really hit some of those folks who have those disproportionate, I think, have a lot of entry-level roles, might be working multiple jobs. And P.S., none of them got to go work from home in a more safe environment like I got to from my corporate job to, my odd space adjacent to my kitchen, which is very safe, right? And I also was able to keep a continuous income stream and keep health insurance. All those individuals impacted by furloughs and layoffs disproportionately tend to be on the more entry-level side of the community. Plus, you got all these social determinants of health that have historically impacted certain races, certain economic levels of our community in different ways. And it just like compounded, right? So you have this crazy disparity where there are people debating whether or not they're going to be embarrassed by their luxury vacation they're taking anyway, despite COVID. That's their version of the COVID experience. You have other people who are like, and I'm not sure I can get food on the table, and I'm not sure what job I'm going to do, and I don't know exactly what to do with my 2 children who have to do school remotely now. And the disparity couldn't be more different. And my children have been going back to school, and my kids are in the Columbus City schools, so we get to see that version of the story. Our friends who have kids in suburbs have different versions of the story. And so I just see a real widening of the divide that's accelerating. And I'm actually a little worried that without the community coming together and intervening, that the repercussions afterwards will disappear the fastest for the haves and linger the longest for the have-nots. And so that has me feeling kind of this intense call to action for all of us who have the luxury of being on this call. It's a luxury that we can dedicate an hour out of our day to this. Chances are we're going to be those who are more in the haves bucket and need to acknowledge that the disproportionate impact hit the have-nots, and we got some work to do.
Thank you, Nate. No, I mean, that resonates so hard with, everything that we hear on the everyday basis from, all our partners in terms of the need that we have in the community right now with COVID. Like, just for example, we're going to have upwards of 75,000 people up for eviction at the end of the year. And those, again, fall in that second bucket that you're talking about of the people that might not have that luxury of getting over the effects of COVID within the next, how many 4 months that we have left in the year, even following next year and the one after that. So I really hear you when you talk about, that intense call of action of coming together right now to figure out what's our recovery is going to look like. So thank you for rallying again. Azure, do you have any thoughts on this before I move on to our next question?
I really don't have much to add. I think Nate hit on pretty much everything. I have been fortunate where I do have a job where I can work remotely, although, the courthouse is still open. So I do have to go in every now and then, but I have not been put out in a major way. And so, but talking to my friends who have children, I think it's definitely hard on children and schooling, and as well as, our society is pretty much a service industry society. So those who are working in those industries, they have been most impacted. They're the ones who still have to go to work, even though they don't know whether their child is going to go to school or not, or how they're going to help teach their child while still working. And so I'm very cognizant of that. And, obviously I don't have all the answers, but I definitely think that no person in this country, this city or state has not been affected in some manner. And I do think it's earnest for the community to come together to try to figure out how we can best help those who are most impacted, definitely.
Thank you, Ashley. No, I do appreciate that comment that we really all need to come together and there's so much work to be done. But hearing you both speak, and then we got a couple of questions in the chat as well, and they're kind of asking about how we inspire others to reflect on their privilege. I know you both talked about, how within your own spheres, you identify your own privilege, but how do we make other people really take that more intense, deep look into their own privilege? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think, 2020 obviously has been a very interesting year, to say the least. Not only do we have COVID, but we have an election coming up. We've had a lot of racial unrest and, police shootings and things like that have galvanized the country. Racism has been brought to the forefront, even though it's never left. And I think that there's just been a lot going on. And I think for me, the best way that I know to inspire others or encourage others to recognize their privilege is pretty much educate yourself. I am on social media quite a bit, posting various videos, various resources, various books. I love to read, and I'm not saying that I even know everything. And I think that it's very important for us to first educate yourself about the issues that are going on, and that will help you, then in turn help you recognize the privileges that you have. And we're not saying that privilege is bad. I think the issue is recognizing that you do have certain privileges, and what can you do to use those to help others, and use that privilege to help those in the community that don't have the same privileges as you. And like I said, even as a Black woman, like I know I have certain privileges. So using those to the benefit of myself as well as the community, I think is very important. And like I said at the beginning, I think educating yourself on that privilege is number one. And the best way I know how to do that is through speaking to others and speaking to my friends. I mean, I've had conversations with people that I'm relatively close to who are, you know, shocked about what's going on and really never realized that race is an issue, or, you know, what have you, that certain communities are marginalized. To me, it's very, I was kind of taken aback, but, you know, kind of what Nate was saying, like growing up, if you're not around any of those issues, if those aren't brought to your attention, where else are they gonna come from? But I think it's very important to educate yourself and also speak to others who may be in those situations about, you know, what other resources could you do, or how can you get involved?
Yeah, I love, Azadi, your recommendation to self-educate. I think for those who already open to the notion that they've potentially experienced privilege, that can really help you unpack your privilege. Actually, to build on that, Solo, I think one of your super strengths is also the key to this, which is tapping into vulnerability as a leader. And so I think those who have become aware of their privilege, wherever they are on their journey, being vulnerable around those you lead or those you influence, and acknowledging that goes a long way. You know, it's funny. It's almost like that no-brainer first step is, you know, admitting you have a problem and maybe not knowing quite the extent of the problem or what to do with it shouldn't be a barrier, because the conversation starts when you're vulnerable and share. And I think that's key. And it frankly, in the world of business, it's an underutilized strength. And we were talking a little bit about Brene Brown's work on vulnerability. Like, it can be really powerful, especially if it's not something you typically bring to the table, to be vulnerable and say, hey, I've been thinking about my privilege and I'm trying to unpack my privilege. And quite frankly, talking about it to others who haven't thought about it not only opens their mind, but usually results in you learning more about yourself too.
First of all, thank you, Nate, for those very kind words. But I really appreciate both of you for that kind of level of insight. And I know we're all like reaching for water as soon as we can. But I'm kind of thinking of sticking with this topic because I feel like you both have a little bit of insight that I'd love to tap into here. The one thing that sticks out to me the most is that even throughout a lot of the trainings that we've had here internally with United Ways, a lot of the conversations that I'm having outside of this organization is that a lot of individual people as well as groups of people are really working towards, or are coming to the table to talk about, you know, more so on topics like racial justice, like privilege. And there's really all these conversations happening on how we can, you know, break that wheel and make everything more equitable and just. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about kind of who you advocate for within that space. Is there something that you feel super passionate about with all of this new world that we live in since, May and the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and everything that's happening in our community? I'd love to hear a little bit more on that from you as well.
Ajvi, you cool if I kick us off? All right. So we've actually had this conversation on my team at work solo because I'll be honest, I'll be a little vulnerable. It feels like the right answer should be everyone who's not privileged. But kind of to the question that's in the chat, you'll exhaust yourself if as an individual, you task yourself with an insurmountable challenge like that. So for me, just through personal relationships I've had and those who've been close to me and where I think some of the wrongest wrongs are in our community, I've focused most of my advocacy and allyship on African American community and on women. And you could say, well, Nate, there are a lot of other marginalized communities out there that, are deserving of attention too. How come, not other races? How come you haven't prioritized the LGBTQ community? And I do care immensely about every individual in our community. And my short answer is you got to start somewhere. And when you look at the data, especially the intersection of race, specifically African American and women, you see some of the most disproportionate differences on almost every dimension you can imagine. And so whatever your favorite metric is to tug at your heartstrings, pick it. And chances are, at least in my experience, that intersection tends to be the most challenging, the most disparate. And so in the spirit of, and I'm stealing a phrase from one of our YLG team members, spirit of focusing on the wrongest wrong first, righting the wrongest wrong, that's where my energy lies.
Thank you, Nate. I hear that loud and clear. Aja, do you have any thoughts on that as well?
Yes. I to bring out a point that Nate brought out with intersectionality, I think that's important. I think, there's a lot of terms that have been floating around. Conversations like this, equity, intersectionality, I think these are definitely important to think about when we're talking about who we are advocating for. Me specifically, I'm advocating for, similar to Nate, Black people, people of color generally, and women, because I am that. But I feel that, looking around, the community, and sometimes I personally can get very overwhelmed because you see so many inequities around the country. The Latino community, LGBTQ, people of color, there's just so much going on, and you want to help everybody, and you want to change everything for everybody, and no one has the answers, because if we did, we wouldn't even have this conversation. Everything would be fixed. But I think for me, I try to understand how things have gotten to where they are, and do what I can to make incremental change. And I know, for me, that's just the best way that I could approach it, because if not, then I would just get frustrated that things aren't happening when I think they should. And so, that's the community that I am most passionate about. I definitely strive to be an ally to other communities and understand and support them in their journeys. and in their fight for equality and equity in this country. And so, but specifically, you know, Black women and in general people of color, I think that's the community who I think have been most harmed by the systematic oppression that has been occurring in this country for decades, centuries actually.
Yeah, it's been a long haul. So to Azri's point, one of the things that's cool to me, it just so happens that she and I have a similar groups that we advocate for, but what's cool is we don't all have to advocate for the same groups, nor should we. And that's what's going to make this all work, right? Focus is going to make it work, right? Even within the areas of passion that Azri and I happen to share, you still got to focus, right? If you try to like wake up every morning and say, today's the day I'm going to fix racism, good luck, right? Or even today's the day I'm going to fix race-based health inequities, good luck. So if you can whittle down to something that means something to you, that gets you energized, and do one thing today, and maybe you got to do one thing a lot of times in a row before it actually tips the scale. Well, then it's a success that you can build that foundation. Like, you know, Azri was talking about standing on the shoulders of others. It's like, we can stand on the shoulders of your own success too. You just can't do it if you want to conquer the world on day one. Like it's built brick by brick by brick. And what's cool is there's other people I know and love who go and advocate for some of those other communities that I don't have the time and frankly mental and emotional stamina to do while doing what I do. And so if we can all focus on the thing that works for us, we've got a really diverse community. Our community is going to advocate for the whole when you add us all together. But if you get one group of people together and say, thou shalt, you know, advocate for this group and solve this problem, you're probably not going to move the needle as well as like all of these smaller incremental efforts that kind of come grassroots up with focus.
I agree, Nate. I was thinking a little bit while you were talking, I think too, being able to affect those around you immediately also helps. Just, I mean, if you're passionate, you mentioned healthcare, racial healthcare disparities. I mean, just, you know, oftentimes I talk to my close friends or my family members, they may say they go to a doctor. Well, you know, making sure they're advocating for this, encouraging them to advocate for themselves, encouraging them to ask their doctor questions. I think just those little things, knowing the disparities that occur in the healthcare system, just encouraging your friends and family to be advocates for themselves in those situations, moves the needle just slightly. And whatever we can do to move the needle slightly for those around us as well as for the greater community, I think is good. We're not going to fix all the problems. And oftentimes I get in, like I said before, I get into the mindset of wanting to fix everything. Wanting to fix educational inequity, wanting to fix racial, like the legal system, anything you can think of, you know, I want it to change, and it can get very burdensome. But there's a place for everybody. You know, that's why we have grassroots organizations. You know, that's why people start these organizations. That's why we have the United Way to help move the needle, because no one person can do everything.
Thank you both for all that. To that point, actually, just to continue your thought, what I kept thinking was that nonprofits work to not exist. Our whole purpose is that we're not going to be needed anymore. So in this specific topic with equity, with justice, with all the different little pockets of work that individuals can plug into and do, I think in our lifetime, don't see organizations like this going away, which is on one side really frustrating because, you know, you're sitting on the right side of history and trying to make the world a better place. But at the same time, it's really, really uplifting for me, at least, to hear the two of you be such huge advocates of, you know, strapping up your boots and figuring out the place for you to plug in where you can. Working towards moving that needle even the tiniest little bit. And Nate, I love what you said about, the repetitive behavior, making habits out of changing small little things that could have a big impact either on yourself, your immediate circle, or even more so your community. So I'm gonna leave inspired from this conversation, just from the two of you. And I'm already seeing from a couple of different comments and texts that I'm getting that a lot of people kind of have the same sentiment. So I'm really, really appreciative of kind of the last 10 minutes of you taking over the conversation and kind of running with that, because that was amazing. And I really do appreciate all the comments on, allyship and being there for people, even if you don't have the time to yourself advocate for them, but always being vocal on your support for different aspects of the community. With that, I know we're almost at time. I think we have about 4 or 5 minutes left. Actually, even less. I wanted to kind of give you the floor to, take a minute, kind of summarize your thoughts if you had any last ones. But before I do that, I did want to make sure to let everybody know that's listening to us right now and or watching this later on, that if you do really want to be involved in this kind of work of addressing different, justice, philanthropic issues, racial justice, as well as focusing on the recovery of our community during this pandemic, plus everything else that we are focused on, feel free to reach out to me or go to liveunitedcentralohio.com to look at all the different opportunities that we have going on this week. But would be really interested to talking to individuals that have commented, as well as others that are listening, about different opportunities to get involved in our affinity groups, Leaders United, and move that needle, just as our two lovely leaders today shared. So back to the two of you. Ajuri, closing comments.
I really appreciate being here. It was a great opportunity. I thank you, Solo. Thanks, United Way, for inviting me. I did see a quick question about how we stay motivated, and I just want to encourage everyone. Like it does get tiring. For me, I always see, if I see injustice, I just get fired up. And so, but it can take a toll. But I think for me, just knowing that I'm doing the best where I am and doing the best I can to move the needle even slightly, that's encouraging. And then that helps me keep going. So I just encourage everyone to just realize that, you're doing the best where you are. Give yourself grace, and extend others grace as well. And just know that you're doing what you can.
So I echo Ajrudi's thanks for being included. This is an awesome topic with great people. It's a pleasure to be able to talk about it. I guess my wrap would be, if you're trying to wrestle with different ways to impact the community, it's all of the above, right? I still consider United Way to be my investment broker, my financial contributions to the community. They know how to spend my money on the community better than I do. Even as much as I'd like to think differently. So I keep giving every year. I do think, to your point, Solo, we're going to need organizations like United Way and the not-for-profits they fund for some time. We've got some pretty hefty challenges that are embedded in our system. But it is also that bit of time you can spare, that bit of emotional energy you can spare. And to Ajrudi's point, I think it's progress over perfection. If you can only spare 10 minutes a day, if you actually carve that out and spend it, you'll be surprised at what you do. And chances are you'll find, that you get motivated and you want to increase that time a little bit, but it doesn't have to be a second full-time job. So I would just encourage folks to feel empowered that whatever they can muster from their time, treasure, and talents, it's worth it, even if it's a small bite at the apple to start.
Well, thank you both again. Honestly, this has been an amazing hour. I've actually very much enjoyed talking to the both of you and tapping into your brains. The knowledge that you've shared, as well as your vulnerability and personal experience, has been, to me, even very invaluable. So really, I really do appreciate both of you. So thank you. With that, I don't want to keep anybody from their afternoon. So just wanted to say thank you to two of you again, as well as everybody that joined us today. And with that, I just really want to invite you all to, volunteer with us to create impact, to advocate for justice, and to gift for creating that continued philanthropic community that we in Columbus are known for. So with that, I really do hope that you consider giving to United Way's Community Response Fund through your workplace campaign or your or through our website. What we do together today determines how we live united tomorrow. And with that, I'm going to end this session today. Say thank you to everybody again, and we'll see you in community. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.